Bro, I am not, absolutely not used to seeing myself looking this professional on a video. It's actually very creepy. And like literally a minute ago, there was this gigantic black shadow on the wall, and I was watching this video just now from this guy called Spyros Heniadis. I guess he's Greek or something. So anyway, he just told me literally to bring the light from in front of me to a bit more to the side and to move away from the wall. For some reason, I always had the impression that the closer I am to the wall, the less likely it would be to have shadows behind me. Like it intuitively just made sense. Like I'm close to the wall, so I guess there's no space for the shadow, but live and learn. It's a little bit hard to disassociate from what I'm seeing in front of me on this screen because it's just absolutely magnificent. Like, can you believe how amazing this looks? But seriously, nevertheless, let's try. So hey guys, Abel here, back with another video. But the really funny thing is that I really didn't change anything except bringing these freaking lights like to a different angle and moving away like maybe a meter from the wall. Like, it's insane. Anyways, in today's video, I'm going to be doing reaction sort of thing to another video. It's not going to be the classic reaction video like what More Plates, More Dates would do, where he's kind of going section to section in the original video, reacting to each and everything, but it's more so going to be a briefer overview summary, giving my thoughts on the topic of that video. And really what that is actually an excuse for me to talk about what they were discussing in that video. So what is the video I'm talking about? Well, it was a roundtable kind of panel discussion or panel debate on the topic of obesity or being fat and whether being fat is your choice or not. Now, I think some of these kind of buzzwords or buzz sentences have been out there in the mainstream, like, is obesity a choice? It is sort of along those lines as well. The guests are interesting in this panel. So we have Greg Doucette, needs no introduction. Anytime he appears, it's usually interesting. Then we have a guy named Myron from a podcast, which apparently is a really huge podcast I was not aware of, called the Fresh and Fit podcast, I believe. There's also a guy called Eric and Zach, but I'm going to just voice over the rest here because at least two of the names I had forgotten already. Now, first, before I would actually get into the actual video or the review of the video, a couple of my own thoughts on the topic. Is being fat your choice? Is obesity your choice? Well, that's exactly why I find the whole topic to be so fascinating, because it is a very difficult question. Is overeating, which leads to being fat, ultimately your fault? I guess technically yes. Is that under your control, whether you overeat or not? Ultimately, the answer has to be yes. We can talk about all kinds of predispositions, physical or mental. There are people who physically just have a harder time losing weight, but certainly have a much easier time gaining weight. They just seem to partition calories less optimally. That is a thing, although much less so. Like, that is a much less prominent factor than a lot of people make it out to be, but it does certainly happen. There's also the mental side, which is just as serious, if you ask me. Even if we're not talking about legit eating disorders, which are clinically diagnosable, sometimes just that compulsion that you have very much feels like this is actually not under your control. I can even tell you that from personal experience, even though I don't think I was ever at a stage where I would have been diagnosed with a legit clinical eating disorder. I was probably not far away from it though either. And so just from my own personal experience, I can tell you that there are absolutely times when it feels like it is actually not your choice whether you're overeating or not. There were times that I can specifically recall where it was almost as if it was not my hand that was reaching for the food, but it was some stranger entity that was doing things that on a deeper level I didn't want to do. And then of course, we can go much, much deeper and talk about legitimate eating disorders, which are much more severe than that. I think people like us, even like me, can only imagine how that must feel like. But, ultimately, no matter how strong is that compulsion that we're talking about and how severe the case is, ultimately, you're the person who is putting that food into your mouth. No matter how strong the compulsion that you feel might be, if I told you that if you reach for that cookie, I'm going to shoot you in the head, would you still reach for it? Maybe all of a sudden it would turn out that you can actually resist. It's just that the negative prompt has to be strong enough. And by the way, if you're telling me that, some people are so depressed that they are feeling suicidal and things like that, so even that wouldn't do it, I could come up with something else. Then I'll shoot your loved ones in the head. If you hate them already, then I'm going to dip you into hot burning oil. Will that do the trick? So we can probably come up with an example which would actually make my point. Now the question is that, okay, if we run with this little monologue that I just gave and we arrive to this conclusion that, okay, if we really break it down, technically being overweight is always going to be your fault. What kind of conclusion does that lead you to? Because I finished at the point of, okay, well, I could always threaten you enough to where you could actually resist reaching for that cookie. One way of concluding from that is, well, okay, so technically it is your fault. Therefore, if you are fat, then you're just a lazy piece of shit, so you deserve to be shamed. The other way of looking at it, though, is, wow, like I actually just had to threaten you with dipping you in burning oil. So I guess this must be really, really tough for you. Maybe it is technically your fault, but maybe it's also true that you need a significantly different approach than what I would use with most of my clients. I think which conclusion you arrive to is going to depend on how much you're willing to accept that people are just very, very different, even if that difference is not palpable or very readily visible to us. Now, on this panel and in this debate that we are going to be reviewing, there are people that are a lot more or a lot less compassionate towards people that are overweight. But I think even the people that are in the less compassionate camp would generally acknowledge the existence and the relevance of genetic differences in sports, for example. Why was Usain Bolt so much faster than everyone else, and still is, by the way, even though he's retired and is probably still going to be for a long time? Well, it's probably not just down to his work ethic, right? Like probably the fact that he's 6'5", yet he can put one leg after the other as quickly as someone who is 5'10", has something to do with it. So we can bring up a lot of examples like that where these genetic differences are very easily visible. And of course, it's always more difficult to talk about them where they are so under the hood, like in this case. For me personally, this one moment and this one story, which I'm briefly going to tell, and I apologize if some of you have heard this from me numerous times before, but one time I was chatting with this guy, a fitness industry colleague, you could say. Seemingly we were quite similar, height, weight, similar stats. And we were chatting about how our super hardcore fitness endeavors sabotaged our lives at various points, such as our social lives. And, if I tell you, when you are really, really hardcore about fitness, why does that impact your social life? Like, what are some of the things that you say no to, and what are some of the things that you miss out on because you want to adhere to your fitness plan? Well, probably for a lot of you, it would be not eating out or not joining into some sort of social experience where there will be food involved because you want to adhere to your diet. In what way? You don't want to overeat, right? Like that is kind of how most of us think about it. Well, this guy missed out on social events because he was trying to bulk. And he was worried that if he joins, then he's going to walk around too much and expend too much energy. Now, I'm not sure exactly how I reacted when I heard this, but I'm pretty sure that there was a long silence that followed. He also told me about the time that when he was feeling guilty about how he was adhering to his bulking diet because he was at home all day, bored, and he was too lazy to go to the fridge to eat anything. So he finished the day at like 1,200 calories. Well, I guess that's one way to interact with food when you're bored and have nothing to do. I think you and I would have some different ideas. So I guess all that is to say that people are just different, just very, very different, much more so than we would be inclined to believe. And again, we're talking about a guy who, like, from the outside, if you looked at the two of us, we were very, very similar. Like we were so similar. Okay, actually, he's my twin brother. Aaron, come here. Okay, that was not funny. But anyway, I'm not going to cut it out. So we were similar, not a gigantic difference that would be so obvious. Now, what could be the difference between me and someone who has a really difficult time going under 250 kilos or 600 pounds? Do I have any realistic chance of even remotely imagining how that must feel like to be that heavy and still having the compulsion to just overeat and eat more and more and more? Personally, I was fat by my own standards, which maybe was obese clinically in terms of BMI, but in terms of body fat percentage, maybe it still barely qualified or didn't qualify at all. North of 100 kilos, like I do start to lose my appetite. And, I am someone that, me and people around me, we all think of me as a big eater, as a person with a really, really big appetite. I had issues with binge eating before, and honest to God, I do not think that I could go up to 250 kilos. I just don't think that's in me. So in that case, would it be fair of me to go out there and start throwing around statements like anybody who is fat and overweight and obese is just lazy and they should just get their shits together? I would say that it's about as fair as someone saying a couple of 100 years ago that anybody who says that there are other planets outside of the Earth is a moron. From where they were sitting at the time, in a way that was a safer assumption to make. Now, looking back, it seems quite foolish. So anywho, let's get into the video and let's start our little review. This is going to be actually much shorter than you would think, and I think that this is going to be the most efficiently done by introducing it through the participants, or the main participants, I should say. Not everybody contributes to this whole discussion that much, and it's only a couple of characters that really shaped the direction in which this combo was flowing, so let's start there. The first participant that I will have to talk about here is surprisingly not going to be Greg Doucette, but it is going to be this gentleman called Myron. Now, Myron makes it fairly obvious from about 5 seconds into the whole discussion that what he's responsible for here is the shock element. Like, he's the person that is going to blow your mind, and he's going to blow your mind by being super, super harsh, very opinionated. He's basically going to come into the room, ripping the door off the frame as he comes in, because he's just going to tell you how it is. Now, how is that going for him in this debate? Not great. Not great at all. Initially, I was kind of just thinking to myself that, okay, like, this is clearly some huge Andrew Tate fan. I have not seen or watched a lot of Andrew Tate's content, but from the little bit I have seen, I clearly recognize a lot of patterns here.
Actually, you know what? This is precisely why a majority of women find a majority of men as unattractive. Because a lot of guys think this way: oh, I just be a nice guy and girls are gonna like me. No, they're not. She's not gonna suck your dick with the same veracity when you're a fat f*** as when you're in shape. She's just not.
I've also seen enough of Andrew Tate's content to see that, okay, he would not be proud that this guy's attempting to be his mimic. I would put the things that he's saying all throughout this debate into two general categories. One would be astoundingly dumb.
The reason why you feel depressed, and it's a healthy response to you being fat, is because it's your body telling you, like, wow, what are you doing? You need to fix this. You're sad because you're not going out there and accomplishing what you're supposed to do.
And the second one would be not completely untrue, like, okay, definitely elements of truth there, and just being completely unnecessarily, needlessly way too fucking rude.
Being fat is unacceptable because you control every single morsel of food that goes into your mouth. It shows a lack of discipline, it shows a lack of character, it shows a lack of temperance, and when you're fat, it's an outward manifestation of your inadequacies. But when you're fat, it says a lot about you. People aren't gonna sit there and be like, let me see if he's a good person. No, they're just gonna assume that you're lazy, which you are, by the way, when you're fat, and you don't have discipline, which you are, by the way.
To the point where it actually eliminates the possibility of any sort of civil discussion. Is the kind of thing that if you said that to me, even if I agreed with you, I would feel like I cannot agree with you, and somehow I have to find a way to disagree because I can just not tolerate this tone and this style. Some people love to make the argument that style doesn't matter. It's all about what I'm saying and it's not about how I'm saying it. I don't agree with that. Style is a part of communication, and it's a part of having intelligent debate. So I think if you're constantly and very deliberately coming across like an asshole, and you're attempting to constantly insult me while you're throwing in some truths there, I'm sorry, I'm not going to collaborate with you. Like, go screw yourself. Now, if here and there that happens, that's one thing. But again, in the case of Myron, that's sort of the better case scenario. So let's look at some of the things that he's saying.
Well, it's unacceptable to be fat.
Do you know why you're saying that?
Yes, because I've been fat before and I lost the weight. I did an experiment back in 2015 where I bulked for almost 2 years, and I got up to 250 pounds, and then I dieted down. It took me about 7 months. I systematically did it, control my calories.
Well, he knows that because he has lost the weight before, therefore it's possible. He bulked up, which was not comfortable because he's naturally a skinny guy.
So you chose to gain up to 250.
Yeah,
you were
so
naturally
I've been
skinny
in all
before
spectrums.
him.
Like I'm naturally skinny.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I was like, all right, I'm gonna get fat as an experiment.
Yeah.
Did it, and then I was like, all right, now I'm gonna lose the weight.
And after that, he lost the weight. So therefore, everybody should be able to do the same thing, which is a phenomenal argument, right? Like, I wonder if he maintains that sort of same idea with other areas. Like, okay, if Michael Phelps tells you that he was able to swim 100 meters over I don't know how many seconds, then is it fair from you to expect the same thing? No, why not? Or you know what, let's not even talk about you. What about all the other Olympians next to him who finished second and third? Are they all lazy pieces of shit because they couldn't do what? I mean, Michael Phelps has done it, so clearly it is possible to do it. You know, it's like, it's a really sad situation where I watch a discussion like this and I'm watching a dude that I don't even like and I'm thinking to myself, dude, like, why didn't you at least lie something? Like, say something like, you know, everybody should be able to do it because I worked with hundreds of clients who were able to do it, therefore I know it's possible. Like, even if that's not true, like, make up something, god damn it. But instead you choose to make the dumbest argument ever, which is one person did it, which is me, therefore you all suck because you couldn't do it or you don't do it. Like, my goodness. Then at one point he is saying,
unfortunately, some people have emotional stuff that happened, traumatic stuff that's happened, so you can't discount and just say, oh, because they're fat.
Boo-hoo, man. Like, there's way worse stuff going out in the world versus
Absolutely.
people saying, oh my God, I'm sad, I'm gonna eat some ice cream. It's like, you're fat, you made that decision, you deserve to be bullied. It's ridiculous to me that we have all these fat people running around, meanwhile people are being bombed in Gaza.
so basically you have no right to complain about mental issues or traumas or psychological problems or whatever, because some people have it so much worse. Like, look at people being bombed in Gaza. Like, and again, where does this logic go? So if I find someone who has it even significantly worse than the people in Gaza, then the people in Gaza have no right to complain. Now, this is roughly the point in the debate where I feel like Myron is achieving something that he definitely didn't intend to achieve, which is being shocking, but not in the way that he wanted to be shocking. Because the way he is shocking is that everybody is shocked because they didn't expect that they would have to argue against such ridiculously dumb, retarded points. You interact in your day-to-day life with people who, yeah, okay, like sometimes they might say things that you disagree with. Sometimes you might even think that they are saying dumb things, but it's within a range, like, you know, like this dumb to this dumb or this smart to this smart. You're kind of programmed to react to certain things. When someone says at a panel with adults all around something so unbelievably ridiculous, it's just all of a sudden hard to find the words. Like what the hell do I say to this? Perhaps if I had to pick out the dumbest thing that he says in this whole debate is that depression is basically your body's way of getting you ready to make a change because it realizes that you suck so badly.
The reason why you feel depressed and it's a healthy response to you being fat is because it's your body telling you like, wow, what are you doing? You need to fix this. You're sad because you're not going out there and accomplishing what you're supposed to do.
Like, again, so I wouldn't even say that it takes reading a couple of books on depression to know how ridiculously, horrendously dumb this is. I would say if you just saw a couple of banners or commercials that are about depression, you already have a pretty good idea as to why this is horribly retarded. But yeah, Myron, just in case you're watching this video, when you feel depressed, you don't exactly feel like making a change, you know? Like if it was really a very effective self-protective mechanism to make a change, then, you know, like you would feel like getting up and exercising and things like that. But like, that's not really what happens. When you're severely depressed, people don't even really feel like going to the toilet. It's like Myron is trying to hold up a flag and say like, listen, I'm all about tough love and I'm all about like making people better. And listen, like I want tough soldiers. Like if you don't want to hear the hard truth, then get out of my side. But it is the truth and you have to know that. He's trying to portray that, but instead what he's portraying is that I have so no idea what I'm talking about. Like I have zero clues. Like I'm completely ignorant about all of this stuff. And you know what? I'm super proud of being ignorant. So I'm just going to repeat these like two-liners and yeah, like go me, I'm super hardcore. That's more like how it comes across. So that is as far as the dumbest thing. I would say that personally for him, like character-wise, the lowest point that he reaches in this whole debate is where he's sort of contradicting himself.
Line of like, I think, for example, like you would be much more attractive to most women than me. Would you agree with that?
So yeah, basically the guy just points out that like, well, like I'm this big and this muscular, but probably people would pick you and not me, even though like technically I guess I'm in better shape or whatever. But what he reacts is just a complete contradiction of everything that he has been saying up until that point.
I mean, that doesn't mean that like if you walked up to a girl and let's say you're not her, like you're a little bit more muscular than she would like, If you have the charm and charisma, she gonna still go with you, man. It don't matter.
He was talking about how all these personality traits and everything don't matter nearly as much as being in good shape and all these things. But, in this case, he was willing to say like, okay, if you have good charm, good charisma, it's all good. This is precisely what in Hungarian we call kicking downwards, licking upwards. So if there's someone that you perceive to be of a higher status or whatever the hell he perceives this bigger muscle monster guy to be, okay, now I'm going to suck up, otherwise I'm going to be an asshole. It's not a good look, dude. And you know what? Like the worst kind of climax of this whole thing comes at around like the 3/4 mark of this whole panel debate, where this whole Myron phenomenon is no longer angering, it's no longer this infuriating, definitely not shocking or bombastic. Like, how could it be shocking? Like, he has been doing this for the past 1.5 hours. It's more so just uncomfortably boring and just annoying. And in a really kind of uncomfortable way where I almost start to feel bad for him, There are times near the end of this whole debate where some reasonably interesting or engaging discussion is starting to develop. I see Greg Doucette like nodding along at times, like, okay, now he got into a brief one-on-one with one of the participants at the other side, like okay, maybe they're going to come to some sort of middle ground, like make Greg understand something which he didn't understand before. I'm going to come back to that. Like I'm noticing on myself that my pupils are dilating, like I'm trying to be somewhat interested in what's being said. And then Myron steps in.
I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Why not cutting weight? So eventually I hit enough plateaus to where like my mentality was just breaking down.
I'm just gonna say it, the elephant in the room. Every fat person would want to be in shape. The problem is that they're not willing to do what's required to get in shape, hence why they are fat.
And basically just destroys the whole thing, just ruins everything that was building up, because he throws in another two-liners that, well, fat people are just lazy pieces of shit and they deserve to be depressed or something. And it's like, okay, dude, we understand, okay? Yeah, we know fat people, they should all fuck themselves and die and whatever. Just shut up, okay? It's kind of like when, I'm sure you've been in situations like this when you're like trying to have a conversation with some friends and then there's just one person at the table who's clearly not competent, or maybe your friends led the kid to the table and like the kid wants to talk into it, and it's like, at first it's cute and everything, but eventually you're like, okay, kid, listen, like just shut the fuck up, okay? Like you're adding nothing to the combo. We are trying to have a combo. So anyways, listen, Myron, if you're listening, I don't know you. You might be a great dude. You might be doing great. Otherwise, in other podcasts that you're doing, this was really bad. This was really bad. You were not good here, dude. So, and the thing is, if you're trying to imitate Andrew Tate, if like he's a role model of yours, I haven't seen a lot of Andrew Tate stuff, but the little bit that I have seen, I will say that I don't know anything about him either, by the way. So if anybody gets pissed off, he might be a terrible person. I've heard some horrific allegations. I don't know if they're true or they're not true. I didn't research it. But one thing I will say is that what I have seen from him, he's really masterfully taking command of exactly these sorts of panel discussions. Like I have seen him with some pretty hardcore feminists that are really easily triggered by even the slightest thing that seems like some kind of generalization, against women or something like that. Like Andrew Tate has thrown in some pretty bombastic stuff, and you know what? Like even those hardcore feminist women just honestly had to just listen, and they had to change their tone and like engage in a combo with him, because God damn it, the things that he was saying, it was engaging. He did have that shock element as well at times. Like he was quite like, okay, I'm in your face, like again, coming in while ripping the door off the frame. But he knew when to pull back from that. There were times when he was calm, when he was just listening, and he knew the right time to throw in all the bombastic stuff. Now, if that's what you're aspiring to, you have a long way to go. Now, there are 4 more people I'm going to be reflecting on in this whole discussion. One of them I'm kind of just going to get out of the way real quick here, because to be honest, he doesn't add too much. He's only noteworthy to me, to be honest, because he's a good example of the phenomenon, which is a very infuriating position to be in, to be honest, where you know that someone is wrong and is horribly wrong, and you're smart enough to tell that, but you're not quite smart or not knowledgeable enough to tell exactly why that person is so horribly wrong. And that's sort of what he has here with Myron. Like he at times is attempting to engage in some back and forths with him, and they just all kind of go nowhere because he's just not making good arguments.
There are people that even if they work out, losing the weight does not come as simple as just going to the gym, cutting calories, watching everything that you eat.
And I don't blame him. Like, it's not easy to make good arguments against this, in large part because, again, generally we are just not prepared to react to such ridiculous things. And secondly, because like some of it actually requires some knowledge. You know, for example, when you want to make an argument to someone like Myron regarding why you cannot judge all overweight people the same way because it's not equally easy or difficult for some people to lose or gain weight. The right argument is not that because people spend different amounts of energy or their metabolic rate is different. Like that's a shitty argument. That's very easily counterable. Myron is definitely knowledgeable enough to do that. So you're going to lose that every single time. The right argument would be more so around topics like, you know, hunger signaling, satiety signaling, how you feel when you feel a craving versus how do I feel. You cannot know how I feel. Just the same way as I cannot know how you feel. Very like 30-second personal anecdote. Like the first time I tried one of these GLP analog drugs, that was the first time for me where I could some sort of idea as to how these skinny people who always have trouble gaining weight might be feeling. Up until then, I could only like fantasize about that. And now I could see that, okay, like normally this is the portion of the food that's in front of me for lunch. And at the end of it, I feel like, okay, I could eat this whole thing all over again. And now I'm halfway through and I'm looking at the rest with a bit of anxiety. Like, my God, I have to finish this whole thing. And when I caught myself thinking that, that's when I thought like, so this is the GLP analog kicking in. Holy shit. Then how must it be like for a person who constantly feels like they have that GLP analog injected relative to me, right? So these would be much better arguments. It requires some knowledge to actually bring them up. So I don't envy him. He kind of just put himself in a kind of disadvantageous situation. A second character I'm going to briefly touch on is Zach, who, as I found out from my wife, is actually the most famous plus-size male model on the planet, I guess. I was not aware of that. He usually says pretty good stuff and seems pretty smart as well. He attempts to like very constructively debate Myron and to actually engage in a bit of a back and forth and point out some of the flaws in his logic.
Well, me too. I've been fat my whole life. I've been way skinnier than I am now, and I've been way heavier than I am now. Was I less valuable at one point in there?
Well, I mean, you can make an argument that you're less valuable when you're fatter because you drain resources, but that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I mean...
Unfortunately, they just don't really go anywhere because either someone joins in who has some less valuable things to add to the mix, or maybe the host just interrupts the whole thing and says like, okay, we have to stop here. We will go to the next topic that we are going to discuss. Yeah, like they have different topics that they discussed throughout this panel. It was not really worthwhile to actually talk about them because they always end up coming back to the same points. This is a bit of a funny one, but there was one point where Zach, I felt like punching him through the screen a little bit. And that was when he was saying that...
I was flabbergasted when I started how many people were commenting and DMing me and talking about how attractive I was, that it just kind of, I don't know, showed me that attraction is a lot more subjective than I thought, and people have a much wider range of what they find attractive than specifically a body type.
Yeah, so Zach, I mean, you should feel flabbergasted. So I'm looking at a super good looking guy, like, holy shit, like I opened his Instagram and just looked at his face and like, God damn it, you're pretty. Infuriatingly good hairstyle, like, God damn it, it should not be legal to have it this good. Dresses pretty well. Like at first I actually thought that this was Blake Shelton, not some plus size model. And on top of that, he is like 6'7". So yeah, dude, like, oh, and by the way, rich and successful. I think you should feel flabbergasted. It's shocking that girls actually find you attractive. So yeah, Zach, like, listen, I think you're pretty good, and I liked you in this debate, but if you think that you are the right representation of how overweight people can still be attractive to chicks, like, come on, dude, like, that's just a humble brag. By the way, I will have to say that just looking at him like this, he doesn't even look fat. Like, okay, if I open his Instagram, he has some pictures where, okay, like, yeah, you are quite fat. But like just looking at you like this, probably because you're so tall, you just look like a big guy, to be honest. So yeah, anyway, don't be a hypocrite. Now, the most negative character in this whole panel discussion was obviously Myron. But if I had to name the biggest disappointment, that would be undoubtedly Greg Doucette. Like, I am actually truly disappointed. And that is because I actually did expect some stuff from him and some good stuff, you know? For the record, of Greg Doucette, my view was for the longest time that he's annoying, which he is. But when it really comes down to it, when it's actually time to have some real talk, almost always I heard some real good, thoughtful stuff from him. I never doubted that he's a smart guy, but it even seemed like, he is the kind of guy who is willing to actually think a layer deeper than your average fitness professional. In terms of knowledge, I would easily put him amongst like some of the better evidence-based fitness professionals and coaches. Like, I think his knowledge is up there. And based on my impressions of him, like even as far as his approach to people and how he approaches the whole issue of fat loss and all of those things, even in terms of that, like I would put him actually quite high. That was my impression up until now. I'm not saying that like it all got destroyed now, but man, the number of times that he's saying in this debate that
when I see somebody who's 500 or 600 pounds, all I can think of is, why do they care so little about their health that they can do this, allow themselves to gain that much weight, knowing it's taken 20, 30, 40 years off their life? I just can't imagine not wanting to live that badly.
And he just keeps repeating this, like, I don't understand how people can do this to themselves.
But if you gain 200 pounds, I'd be like, why are you doing this to yourself?
So this to me is one of the biggest red flags that I can hear someone utter who is a fitness professional.
What makes it hard to, like, I don't understand, like, you were 273 feeling great. How did you get back? Like, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I hear this, what I really want to say is, dude, then you should not be a fitness professional. Or be a fitness professional, but like don't admit this because this just hurts to hear. And goddammit, be quiet and work really, really hard at understanding it, because you should, or at least you should do your very, very best to understand it. Because essentially, what are you saying? I'm going to help you with a problem that I have no clue how you could get into in the first place. I mean, that would kind of be a red flag if a doctor said this, right? Like, okay, so I'm going to, like, Dave McConey, buddy, right? Like, would you agree with me? Like, would you say this to a patient of yours? I'm going to fill this cavity in your tooth, but man, but I have no idea how that hole could get there. I mean, but this is crazy. But okay, let's fill it in. Or actually, a somewhat better example: you go to the doctor, showing signs of insulin resistance. It's like, oop, diabetes. Okay, I have no idea why that happened. Like, I've never seen anything like this. But okay, insulin, stab it into yourself. Like, what the fuck? Like, to some degree, amending a problem and trying to fix it will require at least some degree of understanding of how they actually got there. Because if someone comes to you and they're very seriously overweight, that right away tells you that, okay, like, they can do some real damage when they overeat. And let's say they overeat during the coaching. What do you say to them then? Just put the goddamn fork down? That is one valid way of addressing the problem, but what if that fails? At that point, you just throw in the towel and say, like, okay, like, you're a weak soldier, out. And the thing is that I know that Greg does not approach this problem like that in other instances. So, for example, if someone is always overeating on the ice cream at home, I'm sure he would tell them that, like, oh, well, have you thought of not keeping ice cream in the house? I mean, that's a simple solution, but it required understanding the problem. Now, it happens to be something that it doesn't take a genius to understand that, okay, if you keep ice cream in the house, then that's more likely to find its way to your mouth than ice cream in the store, like 3 corners away. But still, like, what was the fundamental process? Like, you understood what leads to the problem, what led to the problem of them overeating on the ice cream, and you found the solution. If you look at a person who is very seriously overweight and all you can say is like, why would you do that to yourself? Basically, with that, you're just saying that, okay, these people I cannot help, which if that is the case and you're open about that, like, okay, you can help people up to, like, I don't know, 30 pounds of being overweight, but not more than that, then, okay, sure. Then I take it back, then at least you're being forthcoming. But the thing is, I don't think that you would say that. So this is why it's actually really problematic. Also, and this is where it comes down to just like how much brain power are you willing to invest into this, and just how many layers are you willing to dig down. Because from Greg himself, I've heard numerous times that binging after a bodybuilding show where you diet it down and you're at 5% body fat, the binges that you're capable of doing and the cravings that you have are insane. Like, he talked about some of his binges where he was lying on the floor in pain, like he was worried that his stomach is going to rip up. I'm sure that Greg knew at the time already that this was not a very good thing to do, that it's not good for his health, it's not good for his body, it could even be dangerous, yet for some reason he still did it. And that is because there was a compulsion that was, for whatever reason, just too strong to be overcome. Now, Greg, can you imagine if someone feels like that every day of their lives, even though they are not 5% body fat, but 55% body fat or much higher. You might say that that's bullshit and that doesn't exist, but do you know that for a fact? Also, at some point during the discussion, he is talking about abusing steroids for many years, and he just couldn't move away from it because he needed that gratification and he needed the admiration that he was getting from his peers and from clients, and the higher engagement rates on social media, and it was an addiction, and he kept doing it even though he knew that basically the more he does it, the more he is potentially shortening his life. So you can clearly see that there can be compulsions that will make you do things which objectively you know that are bad for you. Now, and in this case, we are talking about something that is like good for your ego, like sure, you're getting some really nice dopamine hits, which is a very, very strong pull. But I think we can safely make the argument that that pull is nowhere near as strong as the pull that food can have on you, which is like, if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's kind of much, much higher up. And by the way, like just on a very surface level, like what kind of a stupid question is this to ask of someone?
What makes it hard to, like, I don't understand, like you were 273 feeling great. How did you get back? Like I'm curious.
Yeah.
But how could you do this to yourself? Like how could you regain the weight and go back from where you started, even though you know it's ruining your health and shortening your life? I mean, like, do you think that this was like a planning process of like one morning sitting down on the balcony and saying, what could be a good plan for the upcoming 6 months? Like something that could reinvigorate me. How about regaining all the weight that I had lost in the past 6 months and undoing all my hard work? That sounds like a great idea. Now let's go find some food. Do you think it works like that? Or do you think it works more like what was in your situation when you broke down after your bodybuilding competition? Like, these are some very simple questions to like ask yourself before you ask something like that from someone else. But honestly, let's actually end this on a much more positive note. And this is by far the most heartwarming, wholesome, just uplifting moment of this entire goddamn discussion or panel debate or whatever this is. And that is when the biggest, most jacked, most monstrously muscular dude comes in and in 30 seconds says 10 times more wisdom than what was ever said before in the entire discussion.
Okay, so the reason I disagreed, especially when I heard the statement, I don't think I'll ever look at somebody based on their situation and think that I'm disgusted. Like, if I see somebody that's a drug addict on the street that's homeless, I'm not disgusted by that. If I see somebody that's incredibly overweight, I'm not disgusted by that. Do I think that there's an opportunity for growth? Do I think they've been put in a disadvantageous position that's probably makes it harder for them? Absolutely. I think I'm kind of an empath, so when I see somebody, I know that there's things underlying, and one of my best friends is 400 plus pounds. I've helped him lose 150, 200 pounds. He's gained it back. And I don't look at him and say, I'm disgusted, but I know how bad he wants it. And just seeing how hard he tries and then reverts, it's almost more tough for me than to be like, oh, that's disgusting, you know?
Like this guy, Eric, just comes along, calm, quiet, respectful, polite to everybody, didn't even say anything for the first 50 minutes, doesn't even drop the mic at the end, even though he should, and just basically ends the whole thing right there, because everything he says is just sound, smart, compassionate, and just thoughtful for a change. My God.
And I think there's plenty of people that look at me and say, that's disgusting. I never want to look like that. So like, I know what it feels like on the other side to like look the way I do and get people look at me like, ugh, that's gross to like have that muscle. And to go back to that point, like you came from a fit place and like deciding to bulk, like that's a conscientious decision to gain weight. Like you already have those habit routines and skills in order to stay in shape. And then you use those same skills you had to pull back on the calories and knowledge you had.
Honestly, isn't that great? Like, it's such a nice moment. Like, what a lovely guy. It's so nice to see people like this. And of course, for us, it's very gratifying. Of course, the most jacked guy is the nicest and is also the wisest. Also at the end, I'm seeing people shaking hands with each other. Mostly I'm seeing people representing the fit people shaking hands with each other, and then I'm seeing fat people representing the fat people shaking hands with each other. Eric shakes hands with everybody. Nobody has a bad thing to say about him because he was just a goddamn good dude. So what a lovely thing to see. It could not have ended any better.